Hey guys, so Adrian from Elite Educators here, and today we have a podcast about the format of the new SEA exam. This is the format that the Ministry of Education has chosen from this year onward, and it gives a huge insight into the different papers, the weighing of the papers, as well as mark and assessment scheme. I think this would be beneficial to all of our students as well as parents, and it will help demystify some of the common questions surrounding this SEA exam.
All right, so today we're taking that deep dive into the SEA. You know that exam everyone in Trinidad and Tobago is always talking about.
Right, and we've got our hands on the 2025 to 2028 assessment framework straight from the Ministry of Education.
The big one, right. This isn't just some random syllabus. This is the document that tells us what's considered essential for students moving on up to secondary school.
It's a blueprint, a roadmap, really gives you a look into what they believe is important for success at that next level.
Exactly, and anyone who's even heard of the SEA knows it's not just about passing, it's about order of merit.
Absolutely. Where you land for secondary school, that's huge, impacts everything.
And that's where the weighting system comes in, right? 3 subjects, all important, but some are a bit more equal than others.
That's right. Maths comes in at 100%, language arts at 60%, and then writing at 40%. Those weightings, they can really shift things in the final score.
So those percentages, the 100%, 60%, 40%, they're not based on the raw scores, are they?
No, that's where standard scores come in.
Okay, see, that's the part that always felt a bit mysterious to me. How do those standard scores actually work?
Think of it like this. Imagine a race, but some runners start a whole mile behind the starting line, right? Standard scores, it's like adjusting the finish line based on how far each runner actually had to travel.
So it levels the playing field. Even if someone's a total maths whiz, if they stumbled in language arts, it's not an automatic win.
Exactly. It's about balance, making sure one subject doesn't completely overshadow the others when we're talking about a student's overall placement.
Makes sense. It's about the whole picture. All right, so let's get into these subjects, starting with English language arts.
All right, so the framework, it breaks it down into 3 main components: writing, language arts, and reading comprehension. Each one's a piece of the puzzle when you're looking at a student's overall language skills.
And let's talk about that writing component because, wow, that's pressure. Narrative one year, expository the next, and they don't know which one they'll get until the day of.
Talk about high stakes, right? And understanding how they're scoring it, that's critical. Organization, for example, that's a big one in the framework.
So it's not just about writing a good story or explaining something well. It's got to be structured in a certain way.
Right. It's more than just sentences on a page. You need a clear beginning, middle, and end, paragraphs flowing logically, ideas presented in a way that's clear, cohesive.
It's like building a house. You need that solid foundation, good strong walls, and a roof that ties it all together. A great story, it needs that same kind of structure.
Exactly. And of course, let's not forget about language arts itself. Grammar, punctuation, vocabulary, those are the tools, the building blocks of good communication.
Like knowing the rules of the road.
This podcast is brought to you and created by Elite Educators TT. Check us out online at www.lessonstt.com, Facebook Elite Educators TT, or 486-645-750-5683. See you guys soon.
Before you can even think about driving.
Precisely. But it goes beyond just memorizing the rules. The framework talks about grammar in context, which means understanding how those rules actually work within a piece of writing, how they make things clearer, more stylish.
So it's not just, hey, here's a comma. It's, here's how you use a comma to make your writing flow.
Exactly, and I did notice something interesting here. Vocabulary, it's not assessed on its own. It's actually woven into the reading comprehension part.
Oh, that's interesting. Shows how interconnected these skills really are.
Right. A strong vocabulary, it's essential for really understanding those complex texts, picking up on the nuances, all.
Okay, so speaking of reading comprehension, this is where things get really interesting. We've got 3 different types of texts they might get, and then 3 different levels of thinking about those texts.
It's a real mental workout, and those levels of thinking, that's where things get really strategic, you know?
Right, so lay it on us. What are these levels? How do they work?
Well, think of it like climbing a staircase. Yeah. First level, that's literal, the basic stuff. Can you find the who, what, when, where in the text? Can you pull out the facts?
It's like following a recipe.
Yeah.
You're looking for those specific instructions, the measurements, that kind of thing. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you said, got to know your ingredients before you could even think about baking a cake.
Right. And that's just the first step. Then we start adding flavor. That's where the inferential reading comes in, going beyond what's literally written on the page, reading between the lines.
Okay, so like, what can you infer from how the characters are acting, what the author's tone is telling you, those little hints hidden in the text?
Exactly. You're connecting the dots, making those educated guesses, drawing conclusions, but you've got to base it on what's actually there in the text.
Kind of like that moment in a movie, right? Where a character's face says it all, even if they don't utter a single word.
Exactly. It's about picking up on those unspoken cues, and then we've got the top of our staircase. Evaluation and appreciation.
Okay, so now students can really get into it, right? Share their own thoughts, opinions, feelings about what they're reading.
They can, but here's the catch. Those opinions, those gut reactions, they need to be backed up. Got to have that evidence from the text.
So you can't just say, oh, I hated this character, or this poem was a total snooze fest. Got to show your work, so to speak.
Right. The SEA wants to see that you can really analyze, spot those literary devices, figure out why the author made certain choices, and then explain it all in a way that makes sense.
It's like being a literary detective, right? You've got the evidence, now you build your case.
There you go. All right, ready to switch gears a bit? Let's talk maths.
Bring on the numbers. Now, the framework here, it gets pretty specific, outlining those 4 main strands: number, geometry, measurement, and statistics.
And this is where we see that clear link to the national curriculum. What they're learning in the classroom directly connects to what they'll be tested on.
But here's the thing that I find so fascinating. It's not just what you know in math, but how you think. Those 3 mathematical thinking processes: knowing, applying, reasoning.
Absolutely. Knowing, that's the foundation. Your multiplication facts, recognizing different shapes, knowing formulas, those tools have got to be ready to go.
Like having your toolkit all laid out before you start building.
Yeah, precisely. Then comes applying, taking those tools and actually using them, in different situations, making those real-world connections.
So it's the difference between just reciting the formula for the area of a circle and actually using it to figure out, say, how much fabric you need for a circular tablecloth.
There you go, bridging that gap between what you know in your head and what you can actually do with that knowledge.
Love it. And then the peak, the aha moment, that's reasoning.
That's where it all comes together. Solving those multi-step problems, spotting patterns, putting those puzzle pieces together. It's logic, deduction, that real aha feeling when you figure it out.
It's like being a math detective, piecing together all the clues to crack the case.
Exactly. And what's important here is that these thinking skills, they develop over time, building on what students have already learned in those earlier standards.
It's like climbing a mountain range, right?
Yeah.
Each peak you conquer prepares you for the next tougher climb.
And just like a climber needs the right gear, students need that strong foundation in those mathematical concepts, those thinking skills, to tackle the SEA head-on.
Speaking of tackling things head-on, what always gets me are those very specific details in the framework, the ones that give you a real glimpse into what the examiners are looking for.
Oh, absolutely. Those little details, those are key. Like in the number strand, they really hone in on expanded notation.
I noticed that too. It's not just recognizing that 256 is 256. They want students to get that deeper understanding, the 2 being 200s, their 5, 5, 10s, and so on.
It's about really grasping place value, that building block of our whole number system, yeah.
Exactly, and we see that same push for deeper understanding in other areas too, like geometry. It's not enough to just draw a symmetrical shape.
Right, they've got to go further, figure out how many lines of symmetry it has.
It's like asking how many ways can we fold this shape so it matches up perfectly.
Yeah.
Really getting into those spatial relationships.
Exactly. And another thing that jumped out at me, the problem solving with time calculations. It's not just reading a clock.
Right. It's, okay, you leave home at 8:45, the journey's an hour and 20 minutes, what time do you arrive? Understanding those conversions, thinking about time almost like a system.
It's all connected, and these are just a few examples, right? The framework's full of these little clues that give you a real sense of what's expected on the SEA.
Like getting a peek behind the curtain, understanding not just what they're testing, but Why.
Exactly, and that's what makes this kind of deep dive so valuable. It's not just about rote memorization, it's about equipping students with the knowledge, the understanding, the ability to think for themselves.
So it's not just about passing a test, it's about setting them up for success in secondary school and beyond.
Absolutely. Those critical thinking skills, they're going to need those no matter what they do in life.
Well said. And on that note, listeners, we'll leave you with that thought. The SEA, it's a big deal, for sure, but it's one step on a much bigger journey.
It's about lifelong learning, that love of knowledge. That's what we want to spark in these students.
Keep those minds engaged, keep asking those questions, and keep reaching for excellence in everything you do. Until next time, happy learning.
This podcast is brought to you and created by Elite Educators TT. Check us out online at www.lessonstt.com, Facebook Elite Educators TT, or 486-6450-750-5683. See you guys soon.